And yellow. Hi, and welcome to my office. It's a co-creation space. It's called GAF, Guilds, Adventurers, and Frontiers. I know, I know, I know. But yeah, uh, there's a lot to unpack there. But for now, we have one video. I moved. The video is "Living in Society is a Game of Egos." I'm going to be discussing this as best as I could. Here we go. Living in society is a game of egos. Look at that. I haven't scratched the. It's been 2 months since I scratched the video. One of those scripty things. So, my dears and my darlings, living in society is a game of egos. I was having this conversation yesterday with my teammate. What did I call her today? The chief commander of all things design. It's intense shit. I love it. But okay, one second. Let me really check if that's basically it. Mail. Okay. Bear with me. Bear with me. Bear with me. Thanks. Yeah, chief in command of all design. Exactly. I should have said all things design, but amazing. So, all right. Okay, I'm back. Living in society is a game of egos, and so I have a platform, and I'm designing it in two ways because, like all platforms, in a way, they have their profile on you, and they have your profile or whatever it is that you do, and whatever they show you, right? And honestly, I feel like there's a lot of suggestivity in the process, but that is not the conversation I'm having with you right now. The conversation I'm having with you right now is living in society is a game of egos, and the reason it's again it's a game of egos. Social structure is a system, which means you have to play a role in it. To play means there's a game involved, right? And ultimately, as society is, we choose different parts of societies to be involved in. Some people kind of like choose to run society as a system, and they end up being ministers and presidents and leaders and politicians and all that fucking crap. I think it's a completely useless position. Personally, I think politicians as a position is not necessarily a useful position. But again, like I genuinely understand why it exists, because if that's not the case, then more people would die in relation to politicians not there, simply because the like I don't know, human nature is a bit too intense. So we kind of need people to mediate, and ultimately, when they start doing that, then we start relying on them more, and then they have to claim more responsibility in order to handle that. I'm not saying politicians are bad. I'm just saying it's not necessarily a position that adheres to nature, or at the very least adheres to the system itself. Because if you kind of like let the system I don't know, it makes no sense that people that don't know anything about finance are setting finance rules. People don't know anything about health are setting health rules, right? Like the person who's in charge of, there is no person in charge of health. There's basically every single version of what health is should actually be, should actually present itself within a structure of whatever. Sadly, though, more than one, three, four people kind of require a leader to make a final decision. And ultimately, when that happens, then it becomes political, and the decision maker stops being an expert in the field and becomes a politician. Whatever. Anyways, I went on a bit of a rant. But to go back, it's like, living in society is a game of egos, because if I want to work in finance, right? I want to work in finance. I have to play the finance game. I have to kind of like figure out how finance works, right? How the system of finance works, and I have to play within that system. I have to create positions for myself. I have to strengthen myself. I have to like learn how it works. How I have to learn a bit of math and play the math game. I have to also do a bit of like economics, and I have to do some physics, and I have to do some like macro and micro, and I have to do some psychology and human behavior, because I kind of have to understand like how stocks go up and down sometimes very ridiculously because of sentiment. And then that's just the finance game. Like other games are simpler. Like to be a doctor, you have to study. I can't be friends with 100 doctors and become a doctor. I have to study. I have to learn. I have to understand. I have to be accredited. And the reason for that is because we wouldn't want random people to just be like cutting people off and be like, I read a book. No, right? I don't know if that's the wrong thing or a right thing. Again, like I'm not really that interested. But the idea is like that's a game as well. And everything has become kind of like a game where you're onboarding and or where you're being trained to or groomed to. And that's where universities kind of kick in. You're like, the first thing they attach you is, like, what do you want to be? Not how do you want to be or who do you want to be when you grow up? Like, what do you want to be? And we end up basically labeling ourselves, our entire existence, as a thing. Like, I am an engineer. No, you're not. You're you're good at engineering. You're good at practicing engineering. You are not an engineer. You are not even a father as well. Like, being a father is a part of you. You're not the whole. And the reason I'm saying it that is because like living in society is a game of egos. So ultimately, like there are identities that are attached to everything you do. So if you have like a 12-hour day or a 16-hour day where you're up in the daytime, you are very much like whatever you're working on. And when you're commuting, you're a driver, right? And then if you're sitting next to the driver when you're commuting, you're nothing. I don't know. Who do you consider yourself to be? If somebody's driving the car and you're sitting, you're redundant. You're just kind of like waste added space. I have no idea, right? Because like we kind of like globalize something and like kind of create that whole image of ourselves when the reality is we're like a whole lot of things. On the weekend, you're something completely different than the weekday. And so, like, why would we attribute anything to our ego if not for the fact that we have grown to a point where we consider our position in society to be who we are, and that's basically it. That's an ego's approach, where it's kind of like the reflection that you're doing on yourself has to include you, which means you are reflecting, and then the minute you reflect, you're reflecting with that bias, and that's creating that tension. So your ego versus another person's ego. You have to meet this person. You have to talk to that person. If you're a doctor, you have to heal this person. Your identities interacting with each other and one-upping each other or fighting each other or like kind of like trying to manipulate each other or like test each other. It's like, oh, okay, I just wanted to be sure. It's like, what did you want to be sure about? Like, just trust me. If it doesn't work, fuck it. What is it that we're risking? And a lot of the times, you kind of like most of the energy is wasted in between simply because like there's a lack of honesty, transparency, commitment, and it's not anyone's fault more than it is. It's the nature of how the interaction kind of like got initiated, right? Like I like to start my interaction with like, hey man, I want to talk to you about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you're down, fuck yeah. If you're not down, I'm not interested. If that's something that the conversation would look like. Other conversations would be a bit more kind of like, because if I want something from somebody, I'll approach them differently, or if I want somebody's attention, or I want somebody to kind of share some insight with me. Each one kind of like is presented with its own unique criteria or approach. And I feel that's necessary, right? But we kind of don't do that because we're not really adjusting to the world as it is. We're hoping that the world accepts us for who we are. And the sad part is we labeled ourselves whatever it is we reflect on. So if I'm reflecting on the engineer in me, I'm an engineer, but like 4 fucking years ago, me personally, I was a bum. A bum. That means I literally am okay to what do they call them, American? Uh, Not a dirt bag. What do they call them? The people that don't mind sleeping under the fucking on the sand. Yeah, probably a dirt bag. And yeah, it's just like they put a bag behind them and they could sleep on dirt. I literally slept for like 6 months, like on fucking beaches in Africa. Like I didn't care, and I walked barefoot for like 3 years in my life. So like, am I that? Am I this? Am I everything? What am I? Which part of me am I? And that's where we identify, and that's what your ego becomes. Kind of like it becomes an identity. It's either you become the identity instead of the other way around. And I started this with like the conversation that living in society is again egos. And it's funny because like yesterday when we were talking about the platform, we were separating the difference between a person's individual's identity and an individual. Because we grow, we expand. There is no right or wrong. We're seasonal. I'm looking in front of me, and there's a beautiful olive tree with a bunch of flowers all over and branches that are kind of like moving with the wind, right? And if you look at this olive tree, like in what's it called? Uh, Come winter time, you're going to think it's kind of like sad and decrepit and kind of like losing, but the truth is it's kind of like lying dormant. And then suddenly it flourishes again and new growth comes about and then it kind of like stops. And then you go like, what the fuck is going on? Because naturally that's how we feel about ourselves if we're not doing something. And so our growth is mutual and very personal, and it's very unopinionated, right? Because you are growing regardless. And every experience kind of matters, and you have something with it. But the relationship you have with the experience is always like stuck within the identity, and that's where me and my commander in chief of all things design was basically in charge, or was basically in charge. That was the conversation I was having with her, and. And ultimately, we were like, I was able to elaborate on the separation of you and yourself, and like we agree on these kinds of things philosophically, like theologically, and like spiritually. But the idea is that uh, you living in society is not the same as whatever your identity carries around, because your identity is doing a lot of interactions, and you're learning and expanding and expounding on your own existence with these experiences. And the platform that I'm working on is supposed to kind of like harness these experiences and allow you to kind of like objectively look at these experiences without having to go through the fact that you are the identity, because you're not. And so every morning you wake up in a safe place at home and you go somewhere to do something with someone. Every morning you're leaving your house, you're leaving a safe space where you're nothing. You're just kind of like chilling, hanging out. You are. And then the minute you get to society, you're kind of like more on alert and more like, how do I respond? Am I aggressive? Am I not aggressive? Who am I? What am I doing? And all these things kind of like reboot your identity and allow you to kind of like restructure who you're truly kind of like building on the outside. And yeah, living in society is a game of egos. And I'm designing a new game. And that's probably like me telling you about my launch of my products. Super fucking beautiful. I love you guys. You are perfection in the making. And after 2 months, it's a fucking video. Bye.